Here we are. Here I am. Believe it or not, yes, this is me, Ryan Thomas, on the Thomas Take Sports podcast. Once again, I look quite different from the last time I was on the show for obvious reasons. I finally decided that it was time to shave the beard, trim the beard, get rid of it, and start from scratch and keep it all even. I'm going to grow it all out evenly this time around in honor of No Shave November. I'm going to be growing it out, letting it grow and have it nice and even by the end of the month. That's the goal. So, of course, I greatly appreciate all the Bills Mafia tuning in tonight. This is a very important episode of my show that I've kind of hinted at it all week long. You guys are going to get a lot more in this show than you typically do. This is going to be a show that I'm going to dive into quite a lot. Typically, I like to keep this show about 20 to 30 minutes. I don't want to date myself. I don't want to say it's going to be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I just want to be honest with you guys and where I stand in regards to everything with this team and let you guys know that this is probably going to be longer than typically 40, 50 minutes. I'm kind of going to be in my head with the information that I have to give, the opinions that I have to share, that I need to share on this podcast tonight, and discussing all things that I saw week 9 between the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals, previewing week 10's matchup with the Denver Broncos, the reality of this team right now, and final thoughts as I wrap up the show. So, the Buffalo Bills fall to the Cincinnati Bengals in week 9 by a score that doesn't matter. They lost the game. I'm not even at a point where I look at these scores anymore with as much validity as I used to, due to the fact that these scores just simply don't matter when you lose games. And when you lose games the way that the Bills have lost games, it looks as if the score is extremely close when in actuality it's not that close. It's really not. It's a score that represents a loss, but it makes it look a lot closer than the game actually was, in my opinion. And yeah, the game was close in certain moments, and I'll break that down. But all in all, it was pretty apparent to me early on which team was the better team between the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals. And it was not the Buffalo Bills being the better team, of course, than the Cincinnati Bengals, as the Bills were losing this one for the majority of the action. So, recapping all of this, starting off losing to the Bengals again. And it's one thing to lose to this team in the playoffs in the form and fashion that we did. But it's another to kind of blink your eyes and really notice that the only difference between the first 2 drives in that playoff game last year and the regular season game this year is that one game was played in the day and one game was played at night. Really, that was the only difference. What happened in those drives was really not that different. Joe Burrow picking his spot, finding the open target, dinking and dunking his way down the field, and they did that their first 2 drives, right? And it was 14-7, then 21-7, and of course, what took place thereafter. I don't have to go game by game recap here. All in all, what I can say though is I'd like to evaluate both sides of the ball and the performances that they had in these games and or in this game in particular. And as I've done that, throughout this season, I've done that. I've looked at both sides of the ball and just how did they perform from start to finish. So I want to start off with the defense first because the offense is going to be more extensive. There's a lot to talk about with this defense, and I don't want to sell this defense short because this defense has gone through quite a lot this year. And I think it's safe to say that in the process of the defense going through quite a lot, this defense has actually kept this team largely in games. And in the evaluation of the defense, you know that this team's lost a lot of key players on that side of the ball that are some of the best that the league has to offer, whether it's, of course, Matt Milano, whether it's Trey White. And there's a lot of new moving parts Rasul Douglas being brought over from Green Bay, Linval Joseph being brought over via free agency, former Viking, former Charger. There's a lot of reasons to like those moves, and there's a lot of reasons to like the addition of Leonard Fournette. I talked about that in last week's show, but Leonard Fournette didn't play in this one. Rasul Douglas kind of limited as he's getting his way, acclimated to the playbook. And, you're at a point where you're trying to fit square pegs into round holes in some cases going into this one. And then you lose a player that has been a massive positive for this team. He's one of the shining lights of this season that has had so few in Terrell Bernard. He loses, some time and misses the rest of the game, essentially the majority of the game with an injury, a concussion. And he's out, and you got to rely on your essentially last year's third string starting linebacker in Tyrell Dodson, who is a coverage liability in some matchups, of course. So being that he's a smaller linebacker. So you're undermanned there, and you're going to be undermanned there for the rest of this season. There's no secret in looking at that and understanding that. But what was apparent to me was, yes, those first two drives, Cincinnati did virtually whatever they wanted to do. But there were 7 consecutive drives where the Cincinnati Bengals didn't get a touchdown, which means on the flip side of that coin, there were 7 consecutive offensive drives where the Bills defense gave the ball back to their offense, and their offense could only muster up X amount of points in a losing effort, which, we can play this blame game all we want, and that's what we've done since this game ended, and rightfully so, because this team is nowhere near where they should be. But looking at this game, there is plenty of blame to go around. Looking at this sport, there is plenty of blame to go around with any team that is bad, because this is a team sport. And yes, could you say the defense did better than the offense, or the offense did better than the defense? We could go through that. We'd split hairs over doing that. But at the end of the day, you win as a team, you lose as a team, and this team now sits at 5-4. And sitting at 5-4 is such an astonishing record for this team, because if you looked at this schedule prior to the season, you know that, yeah, they had some tough matchups starting week 1 on the road against the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. That's a tough matchup. Little do you know that 4 plays into that game, Aaron Rodgers goes out and the Bills lose on a punt return in overtime. Didn't plan that one. Then you got the Las Vegas Raiders, who are a terrible football team. The Buffalo Bills beat them 38-10. Week 3, you got the Washington Commanders, who are in complete and total disarray in their own right. A little bit of an identity crisis there with who they are. They've traded Chase Young. They've traded Montez Sweat. They're in a little bit of a rebuilding mode post this game, of course, 6-7 weeks back. And the Bills win that one 37-3 with relative ease. Probably one of the most dominant efforts offensively and defensively that the Bills have had all year. And then you go to week 4, which was supposed to be the most daunting task that the Bills had all season long to date, especially in the Miami Dolphins, who had put up 70-plus points on the Denver Broncos the week prior, and yet Buffalo beats them 48-20. It's a game where you see the offense firing on all cylinders. It's a game where you do lose Tre'Davious White. It's a game where you know that you're going to have to make adjustments. And then 1 week later, you have to travel to London. You take on the London Jaguars, as I like to make that joke, on a weekly basis. And the Jags beat them 25-20, and you lose Matt Milano in that one. That's a turning point moment for this season, whether we look at it as a turning point moment 4 or 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks from now. That was a turning point moment. You don't just lose players like Trey White, like Matt Milano in consecutive weeks, and just replace those guys via trade or replace those guys via next man up. You just don't. It's a cliche that's thrown out there by coaches and players and such, but you don't just replace those players. There's no, replacing those guys. So then, to me, the moment of this season that has kind of lended itself to being where we are right now was dating back to week 6 a few weeks ago. The Buffalo Bills hosted the New York backup Giants, where most of these players on the Giants were backups outside of Saquon Barkley. And Buffalo came away with a 14-9 win. That's where you saw these offensive struggles really continue from the week prior. First half against the Jags in London, I believe it was 7 points. It was 11-7. Second half, they make it a little bit more of a game, and that didn't go their way. Ultimately, they lost that one, of course. But those offensive struggles bled into this entire Giants game, where up until the fourth quarter, they were able to put points on the board, ultimately skate by with a win on a pass interference call that never was to end that game. And you notice what I did there. And I'm going to go back to this in a brief moment, but talking about calls that, could have been made, should have been made potentially against the Bills or for the Bills, I'll go both ways. I'll play both, sides of that, where I'll look at this and say, well, in that moment against the Giants, they should have been called for pass interference essentially twice. First time they were, second time they were not. And they should have been. Second one was just as bad as the first one, if not worse. And then this game against the Patriots, it's just continuing that theme of slow start on offense, banged up defense, forcing your banged up Bills D to keep you in these games when the offense is as healthy as any in the league, with as many premier names in the league on one side of the ball on offense. You have arguably a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback in Josh Allen eventually, and you have a Hall of Fame caliber wide receiver in Stephon Diggs, and you have emerging talents on this team like James Cook and Dalton Kincaid. And then week 7 or week 6, week 8 rather, that's when you see Kincaid get his first receiving touchdown almost halfway into the season as a rookie. And you start to see James Cook get less touches. And you start to see this offense kind of have a little bit of an identity crisis post the injury of Dawson Knox. Now, Dawson Knox is a key figure to this season, just as much as Trey White was, just as much as Matt Milano. And me saying that, you guys at home are probably thinking, why does he believe Dawson Knox is just as key a figure as those two? He's not a better player than Trey White. Of course he's not. He's not a better player than Matt Milano. Of course he's not. But in terms of the structure of the defense remained the same, losing both of those players. Whereas the perceived structure of this offense drastically changed the moment that Dawson Knox had his wrist injury. And as Sean McDermott alluded to after that game, I believe it was against Jacksonville, that Dawson Knox would have to have the surgery that would put him out for an extended period of time. No word yet, though, even till this very minute, as to whether or not Dawson Knox is out for the year, but I would lean towards yes, right? I would lean towards yes. Wrist surgery is no joke, right? So going into the season, everyone that I know that's in the know, and myself and fans and whoever it may be, we knew that Dalton Kincaid was drafted for a reason. He was drafted to be a factor. He was drafted to be somebody that would be a factor in this offense along with Dawson Knox. And I thought, okay, that's just the headline. What else is there? What else am I going to go to the training camp to find out? What else am I going to see that would make me think there's more to it than just this? And I was blown away by the Bills offense in training camp, the 12 personnel, the moving of Kincaid, putting him in the slot, putting him on the outside, putting him on the inside, sometimes even lined up with James Cook or with Damian Harris in the backfield to run a route or to pass block, which I found that to be very interesting. And in training camp, They're trying things that ultimately they might do in the regular season, and in some cases they don't. I haven't seen that much in the regular season, but we did see it a little bit, early. Not often, but early. You go back, DVR those games, right? And you'd go back and you'd see a little hint of that, but it didn't really amount to much. And ultimately, neither did the 12 personnel. Because prior to Dawson Knox's injury, Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox were not fixtures in this offense the way that they were told to the world that they would be. And that's the key. Kind of that whole process of, hey, we're going to tell everyone that this is the offense that we're going to run now. We're moving towards this. Other teams are going to say, what ways did we stop that or try to stop that before? And are we going to adapt to that? And ultimately, they never did adapt to that. And they still probably would not have adapted to that if had not Dawson Knox been hurt, I mean to say. And Dawson Knox going down then changed the structure, put it in rewind from a 12 personnel group to an 11 personnel group where you have just Dalton Kincaid and Stephon Diggs and Hardy and other receivers out there, Gabe Davis, Khalil Shakir, which is similar to what they had previous years, last year with Dorsey, last year prior to that with Dable, and years with Dable, which is where they were successful. Running those 3 wide receiver sets, sometimes 4, mixing in a tight end here and there, and trying to establish more of a run game with what I believe is a more talented group now than what they'd had in previous years. On paper, James Cook more elusive than Devin Singletary. Damian Harris going into this season accomplished as a runner. He had one very, very elite season with the New England Patriots. And then Latavius Murray's always been a reliable back in this league. But now you move forward, it's Cook, it's Murray, and now it's Leonard Fournette, who had put together several great starting seasons in a row here in his NFL career. So not so much as of recently, but just over the course of his career. So that's something to be continued. We don't know how that's going to materialize, but that's something that is in the works, right? They wouldn't have made that move for no reason, right? I would hope so. So looking at this offense and evaluating this offense, I think the whole perception of what they thought they could do was one thing, and then coming down to doing it was another, to the point where the other pieces that were accustomed to not running that offense, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, regressed and were kind of playing catch up, learning this new offense while it not necessarily working, and trying to figure out, how do we make this work? How do we make this right? What do we need to do to fix this? And then all in intents and purposes, it didn't even ultimately matter, because those 2 dynamic tight ends won't be on the same field for the very near future and potentially beyond. So now you're back to what you had before, but you have a better, more athletic tight end in Dalton Kincaid than Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox would be the first to admit there's things he can do that Kincaid can't, and there's things that Kincaid can do that Knox can't. That's what the thought process was behind both of these guys complementing one another, providing a safety valve, a unique safety valve for Josh Allen. And it leaves me scratching my head. And it leaves us scratching our heads as to, how can this offense get better? How can this offense get back to what they were before? But you guys remember, that are tuning in right now, the comments, the people that are commenting, these are names that I've seen for years on this show, commenting on my live stream, which I really appreciate. You guys remember, I was no fan of Brian Dable. And a lot of that had to do with over-relying on Josh Allen and not letting Allen use the weapons around him. These drawn-up design runs that would get Allen hurt, get Allen hit, the lack of consistency in their run game when they did have running backs that were more than capable. Were they as talented as James Cook? Maybe not. Were they good? Were they NFL caliber? Zach Moss is proving it in Indianapolis right now. Devin Singletary got scooped up like that by the Houston Texans when he was a free agent. So other teams value our players eventually as they hit the free agent market, and they seem to do pretty well once they leave Buffalo. And I think that has to do with just the simple fact that the coaches are not utilizing the players to their best ability. And, I went back, I was just kind of thinking about previous teams that we have had. And I got to thinking about CJ Spiller. He was talking on some college program, and I just saw him on there, ACC, SEC Network, something like that. Coaching at Clemson, doing what he can to help out the Tigers, doing what he can to help the program. And it got me thinking, CJ Spiller was a hell of a player. He was. There were 2 years where 2012, he ran for, I believe it was 1,700 total yards he amassed, whether it was 1,300 rushing, 400 receiving, something like that. And then the following year, he totaled 1,200. And then the next year, it was like 5. And then it dwindled. And then he was gone. Just like that. And he was a first-round pick. He was a top 10 pick. He was a great college running back, Reggie Bush caliber collegiate running back for what he did with Clemson and how productive he was week in, week out for the Tigers. He was one of those first few players that kind of brought that new wave of Clemson to being what they are known as today. And that's why he's back there. That's why he is continuing that journey there. It's a new journey, but it's kind of a back to the future journey, right? And it got me thinking, that's a player that we didn't use, right? And here's another player that we didn't use, right? Here's another player that we didn't use, right? This situation that the Bills are in predates now. This has happened quite a lot over the years with players that we have had. One of the most high-profile moves that the Buffalo Bills have ever made is signing Terrell Owens. 1-year deal, granted. Future first ballot Hall of Fame wide receiver, as he should have been, but wasn't. And that's another topic for another day, as ridiculous as that was. But that's another player that they signed to use that they didn't have the right quarterback to get him the ball. Then they made the change from Trent to Fitz, and Fitz made sure he got him the ball. And by the end of the year, Terrell Owens was doing snow angels in the end zone. And it just makes you wonder, had they tapped into that sooner, how would that season have worked out? If they had gotten him the right quarterback, had that season been a playoff year? Who knows? But it's not the first time we've been here. It's just the most high-profile time that we have been in this position since the days of the 4 straight Super Bowls. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is the before-mentioned Hall of Fame caliber quarterback in Josh Allen and the before-mentioned Hall of Fame caliber wide receiver that's on the precipice of breaking franchise records that are held by a Hall of Famer named Andre Reed. And Jim Kelly knows all the records he's got. He's probably gotten them written down on his notepad at home, and he's just tallying how close Josh Allen is getting to each record each and every week that Josh Allen's in his 6-year career breaking Kelly's records that Kelly's career amassed, 10, 11 in the NFL? So not only is he going to break those records, he's going to shatter those records. He's going to set himself apart from Jim Kelly in those record books. And that matters when those two players, Jim Kelly and Andre Reed, are two of the best players that the Bills have had. Two of the best players, not of all, 1 and 2. You can make that argument for sure, but easily the best quarterback and wide receiver that this team has ever played, that this team has ever had, rather. So that matters. That matters. That 100% matters. And It matters so much to the present, and it matters so much to the future of the Ken Dorsey situation, because each coach's job is to maximize the talent that he has. And you look at the AFC playoff picture, you can't tell me that Jacksonville has a better quarterback than Josh Allen. You can't tell me that Miami has a better quarterback than Josh Allen. You can't tell me that Jacksonville has a better receiver than Diggs. You can make the argument that Tyreek is better in some capacities than Diggs. You can make the argument that Diggs is better in some capacities than Hill. Tyreek Hill, that is. But this is a team that should be in that upper echelon of the AFC. And I think two reasons they are not there, and it's becoming apparent as to what those two reasons are. It is the compounding factor on one hand of Ken Dorsey not utilizing the talent that they have, and the defense having the injuries that they have. And those two things are meeting in the middle, and they're plaguing this team terribly. And I'm not one to come on typically and call for a coach's job. That's not my decision to make. That's not my call. But I am somebody that likes to state my opinion, and that's what this show is all about. It's an opinion show. I don't have any journalistic lead that tells me that they're going to fire Ken Dorsey within the next week. Nothing has been said to me in that regard. I haven't even, heard a rumbling of that. But at 5-4, the Ken Dorsey situation is as simple as this. If things continue the way that they have with these underachieving offensive performances, even in victory, 24-18 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 14-9 against the New York Giants. If those performances continue in the upcoming matchups that you have, sitting at 5-4, knowing that you have the Denver Broncos coming off a bye, coming off a win over the Kansas City Chiefs, if that continues and this team falls to 5-5, that's a problem. If that continues and the Bills play the Jets the week after at home, again, 2 home games coming up here against Denver and the Jets, they lose both of those games at home, then yes, you got a huge problem. And can anyone raise their hand and fire a comment telling me that they wholeheartedly believe that the Buffalo Bills can beat the Buffalo Bills that we just watched against the Bengals, the Buffalo Bills that we just watched against the Bucs, the Bills that we watched even in victory against the Bucs and the Giants? Can they beat the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly, mind you? And we know that that is one of the most hostile territory environments that you could ever go to in the NFL. Can we confidently say that this offense can go tit for tat with the tush push, Jalen Hurts and Kenneth Gainwell and DeAndre Swift and A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and all these weapons, Dallas Goedert if he's playing, all these weapons that they have? Can we go tit for tat with that? I don't know. I don't know. And is this a situation where you look at their record? We'll go back to it. They sit at 5-4. So we do the math on this. Okay, they go 5-3. Let's just say they go 5-3. Is 10-7 good enough to make the playoffs in the AFC in 2023-2024? It might not be. It might not be. With a divisional record that has multiple division losses potentially, those are the games that'll matter. And right now, a loss to the Jets, a loss to the Patriots, and a win against Miami, that's the tail right there. That 1-2 record out of that 5-4 is why things look the way they do, frankly. Not the loss to Cincinnati. Losing to Cincinnati is not really the end of the world. Losing to the Patriots, losing to the Jets, and not knowing what version of the Dolphins we're going to get, and not knowing what version of the Bills we're going to get in that next game against Miami, that scares me, because that's what can be the difference between the Bills making the playoffs or not. The KC game, big AFC game. Chargers, big AFC game. Dallas and the Bills, those are the two biggest underachieving, talent-filled teams in the league right now. Conference to conference. NFC Dallas, underachievers based on the talent that they have by a massive margin. I don't like Dallas. You don't like Dallas. But you know that Dallas is talented. They got some studs on that team. Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott can be very, very dynamic when he's on. When he's off, very similar to Josh Allen. When Josh Allen is off, he's not so great. When he's on, he's a freight train. He's tough to stop. And their defenses, both very well coached. And they sit at 5-3, Dallas, and Buffalo sits at 5-4 as of right now. So that's a 50-50 matchup that I can't confidently say who would win that game. I'm going to pick Buffalo for obvious reasons, but that's a tough matchup. The Chargers, that's a tough matchup. The easy part of this schedule was through the first 9 weeks, and they're one game over 500. Do they need 11 wins to make the playoffs? I think they do. I think that's the safest route to get them to the playoffs. And if they don't get there, let's live in that land for a minute. What happens if the Bills that sit at 5-4 right now do not make the playoffs? You have some serious discussions ahead of you that I don't close my eyes and envision any circumstance whatsoever that if the Bills miss the playoffs, that Ken Dorsey won't be fired on quote unquote Black Monday, or maybe even prior, when Black Monday is the day that all the NFL head coaches that aren't worth a crap that season get canned, just putting it mildly, and coordinators and such. But Sean McDermott is in a situation that I feared he would be in. And that situation is, I entrusted a young, inexperienced offensive coordinator to take the reins over a man that did some decent things with the position. Don't get me wrong. Did some decent things as an OC. Did some not so good things as an OC. Kind of clashed heads with Sean McDermott at times over his unwillingness to run the ball when McDermott wants, at the very least, a more balanced offense. Ken Dorsey did give that to us at times. And usually when he did, the Bills won. But, and that, meaning this year or last year even. And this is probably, if I were to look at the team right now, this is probably the best offensive line that Josh Allen has ever had. And I'm not saying that these guys on the line are all pros. They're not. But just comparing this starting 5 offensive line group that the Bills have had, comparing it to the other ones that Allen's had, it's night and day. Osiris Torrance has been big for them. Connor McGovern's been big for them. Spencer Brown has taken a lot of steps forward in his game. We've seen a lot of good things from him. And the line has looked, for the most part, pretty good when the offensive game plan is prepared for what the defensive line throws at them. And it was not against the Cincinnati Bengals. You go back, you watch the different stunts that the Cincinnati D coordinator would call and change the pressures from the D tackle to the D end on the right side to the D end on the left side. They were shaking and they were moving. And they were coming after Allen as much as they could, and they were forcing Allen to make decisions that he does not like to make. And that's what good teams do. I'm not going to take anything away from Cincinnati. The one thing that I'll say is that I have had very few posts and I will be honest with you guys. I've had quite a few, but I've had very few posts go what the kids call these days viral. I don't even know if that's a term as much as it was 2-3 years ago, but it was a term 2-3 years ago that I heard, and it sounds pretty good. Going viral, where you post something, and before you know it, in the blink of an eye, there's 300 people sharing it, 400 people retweeting it. My post showing the Gabe Davis face mask grab that was not called. The caption is as simple as it can get. The refs can change a game by not doing their job. They can change a game. They can change not just a game. I'll correct myself. They can change a season. They can change a team's fortunes by not calling penalties. And this year, more than any other, I've seen this league wide. I don't just watch the Bills on Sunday, Monday, or Thursday. I watch a lot of football. And I see some of the worst reffing, officiating is a more professional term, than I have ever seen in my life. And this goes back to, I couldn't remember for the life of me which season it was, but it was the primetime game. It was the Packers and the Seahawks. And I think it was right after the NFL went on strike and they had replacement referees. And there was that egregious touchdown that was called. I think it was for Cincinnati, or no, pardon me, for Seattle and against Green Bay. I might be wrong on that. I know it was with those two teams. In that game, some of the worst officiating ever, but those were replacement refs. Those were guys that they were working at Pep Boys the week before, and they ended up getting a license to referee and put the uniform on and went out there and officiated an important NFC game between the Seahawks and the Packers, two teams that were very good at the time. Very good at the time. And that call changed those two teams' seasons, one for the better and one for the worst. You go back, you look on that game, that one loss, that adds up as the record continues to change, wins and losses wise. So this was a game between the Bills and Bengals that made me really look at the NFL in a much different way. This league that we all tune into on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays is just as big a farce and joke as a pre-choreographed, pre-rehearsed WWE, AEW event. And what makes me say that, that's a very bold claim. But what makes me say that is when I see the refs not call something for a team, and then moments later they call something for that team, almost as like a makeup call, number one. And number two, you see a defensive player get a sack. He wants to get accredited for the sack fully, but it was a half a sack or something like that. And you see the player on the Bengals holding the ref's hips, which was really weird, really strange. I've never seen anything quite like that. And the referee, almost in like a odd flirtatious way, kind of laughing and exposing his neck. Like it was strange. I've never seen anything quite like that. And you guys are all knowing what I'm referring to there. I don't know if it was Sam Hubbard or Hendrickson or whoever it was, but it was odd. And it was something that the whole world saw it. Anyone that was watching that game saw it. And it affects the credibility of the NFL. It affects the way people look and perceive football as what it is, the pantheon of the sport. NFL football is the cream of the crop. It's the best of the best. It's the best football in the world. And man, it doesn't look like they give a rat's. They don't care about this product. And if they don't care, why should anyone care? And is this something that the recently extended um, Roger Goodell is going to address in the offseason, just for it to not essentially get fixed and for us to continue to see it here and there, maybe in different ways? I don't know if that situation with the officiating will ever improve to the level that it needs to. Because much like back then in that crappy Seattle Green Bay game on Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, I believe, one of the two, those refs were replacement refs. And come to find out, this new CBA gets put together, and you come to find out that the NFL went a little bit skimpy, slim on their budget with these referees, and these referees are not full-time employees like they were before, the Ed Hockley days, of a guy being at every single week, every single game that he could get his hands on. Maybe he'd do 2 or 3 games in a weekend. He'd do a Sunday game, and then he'd fly out on a Monday, and then he'd do a Thursday, then he'd do that next Saturday during the holiday season, and then he'd do a Monday, and multiple games. Got to a point where the guy was notorious for the guns. He had some chiseled biceps for a 55-year-old NFL referee. Now, each game that I watch, each one that I watch, 3 games on a Sunday, 1 on a Monday, and 1 on a Thursday, I don't know who these refs are game to game. I don't recognize these refs from previous weeks. Their faces I've never seen before. Out with the old, in with the new. I get that. That's business. That happens. But when you're a multi-billion-dollar industry, you got the biggest advertisers handing you money hand over fist. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to get a 60-second ad in the Super Bowl. And these are the referees that you put out. It is nothing short of disgusting. It is nothing short of pathetic. And whether it impacted this game or not, I'm not talking about this, and I'm not looking at this as if these refs screwed the Bills. The Bills have screwed themselves by a lack of good coaching, to put it mildly, and to put it shortly, right? I talked about that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more once I'm done talking about these moronic referees. But that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. And no one's willing to really address that because they're afraid. They're afraid to address it because they don't want, people thinking, oh, they're talking about things that they shouldn't be talking about. Well, I'll talk about anything. If I see something, I'm talking about it. I'm just a straight shooter. And I always have been. I always will be. When I see something that's bullshit, I'm going to talk about it. And that was bullshit. That was a moment in the game, along with this phantom intentional grounding call, that changed the game, changed potentially a season for a team, and made the result of the game not authentic. And that's why I compare it to a WWE match. The result of a WWE match is seen by millions of people on a Monday Night Raw, Friday Night SmackDown. The result of it is predetermined. The match is staged. I'm not saying that about these games. I'm not pulling an Arian Foster and saying that these games are scripted. But what I am saying is, once the result is finished and one team has more points than the other, you look at the score and you think to yourself, that's not even real. That's not even the real result. That's a result that was manufactured by a pathetic referee officiating crew. It's just, there's no other way for me to sugarcoat it or say anything differently than that. And I don't know how else I could have addressed that than how I did. I had to address it because the post blew up. I mean, I saw it everywhere. I had people sharing it that I'm not even friends with on Facebook, or people that were following me on Facebook, or people that were following me on Twitter. I gained followers from it because so many people agree with me that this brand of football is almost as close to being as unwatchable as it's ever been. And it's a problem. It's a real problem. It makes these games that you watch, games that you wait to watch, and it makes you say to yourself, at least I do, out loud. You can ask anyone, my friends that I watch the games with, let them play. Just let them play. Stop. We know that you're out there. We know that there's times where penalties deserve to be called. Then there's times where penalties don't deserve to be called. And then there's a moment in the game where the refs refer to a play as a non-catch, and this was a seminal moment in the game. Sean McDermott looks at it in the headset. He's got the people saying, challenge that, Sean. He throws the challenge flag. I'm sitting at home on TV. I'm thinking to myself, why is he challenging this? This was not even close to being a catch. Why would we waste a timeout at that point? What was the purpose of that? And then there's moments where Micah Hyde is hurt again, and it's a neck thing or a shoulder thing or whatever it was, a chest thing. I don't know what it was at that time because he went down twice. And Sean McDermott calls a timeout right before that, right before seeing the commotion that he's down on the. That's happened 3 or 4 times this year where we need those timeouts. Those timeouts are not sticks of gum that you just hand to somebody. Like they're important, right? I don't know, guys. This one was tough. This one was a seminal moment in my fanhood of this era of the team that's made me close my eyes and feel like I'm having, and I'm not making a joke out of this at all. It's a very serious thing that I'm talking about here. Maybe not the context of the subject, but going back and the PTSD of seeing these teams implode when they have the game in their hands. They just implode. And that goes back to the last 30, 35 years. And it makes you wonder, is this just the way this team is going to be? The Buffalo Bills, the Bills will be the Bills, I guess. I thought that was over. I thought this was a different era. I thought this was a different organization. And this season, it's been as close to closing my eyes and seeing the drought years as it's ever been. And that is scary. That makes me think that change is a coming, and it could lead to a lot. It could lead to a lot. One of the things it could lead to, which would be like a godsend from above, is if the Bills found an out in Von Miller's contract and just said, do whatever you want to do. Do your podcasts, do another year with another team, do whatever you want. If it were me, man, I got to tell you, I would be done with it at the end of this year. I'm not banging the drum to keep Von Miller a Bill for the rest of his career. I'm not, and nor will I ever. I don't see it. I know they had a devastating injury last year. I empathize with that. I do. But I've said this to so many people, and they say to me, hey, he had a devastating knee injury last year. How could you say that he was a bust? He had 9 sacks prior to that, or 8 or 9 sacks prior to that injury. How could you say he was a bust? Yeah, he had a devastating knee injury last year. I saw it. I also saw the contract they gave him. Understanding the money that they gave him, as well as anyone, that the money that they gave Von Miller was for the player that he was, not for the player that he's going to be for the Bills. And the structure of the contract tells you that. It was a 6-year deal for $120 million, but it was also 3 years out of that deal where he gets paid by the Bills for 3 years and then he can go. They've restructured that. They've tweaked it a little bit. Potentially, I believe he could leave after 2. Will he leave after 2? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. At the very least, I hope he's gone after the 3, because the amount of money that they gave him. We shop at Dollar General, right? I know I do every now and then. Drive by, I need something. I realize at Dollar General, I can get a stick of deodorant, I can get shampoo, I can get toothpaste for like $5. I can't go to Walmart and buy the same three things and expect to pay $5. I can't. I can't go to Target. I can't go to Tops or Wegmans, buy those three things and expect it to be $5 or less. My point is, in saying that, is that they gave Von Miller all this money when, yeah, they brought in a big fish, great player, great career on the back nine of it, when they could have spent that money on multiple things. Rather than me going out and buying the best toothbrush and then waiting a little while to get my toothpaste and just using the toothpaste I had when I needed to get new toothpaste in general and a new toothbrush, I bought the one thing that that made me spend a lot of money that I didn't really need to spend. You could have got a wide receiver, you could have got a defensive tackle, you could have got another corner, you could have got probably 3 or 4 players, maybe even 5, with the salary of Von Miller, combining the salary year to year of Von Miller. Even in this day and age of the National Football League. People say to me, well, Ryan, he's coming back. He's trying to come back. They're getting him in the rhythm. He didn't have a training camp. He didn't have a preseason. Well, he shouldn't be out there. He shouldn't even be out there. Then if that is the case, if he is that far away from being ready to produce meaningful snaps for this team that is now 5-4, then he shouldn't be playing. And you know what makes me say that? The fact that it's actually happened in games. He's played, a third quarter. Then by the middle of the fourth quarter, he's not even out there. If that's the case, why is he even playing? 30% Von Miller is not as good as 100% anybody. He's just not at 33, 34 years old. Come on. That's the way I'm looking at this right now. And if this doesn't improve, if the Ken Dorsey situation doesn't improve, he will be fired. That's it. And if he is fired, then what? Well, then we got to hire an offensive coordinator that has some experience in the position, that's had success, that might be a little bit older, by the way. Might be somebody that's in their 60s. Might be somebody that has been around a long time, that's created success. I don't know who that is, to be honest with you. I don't have the names, Rolodex of offensive coordinators in my head right now. But what I do know is that we have a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback again, and we have a Hall of Fame caliber wide receiver. We have a very, very dynamic running back in James Cook, and we might have the next new breed talent tight end, the next new breed talent of tight end at that position that's going to usher in like the next era of the position. Yeah, he's very similar to George Kittle and Travis Kelce and Hawkinson and, those guys. But he's like the first of the next wave of those guys. Dalton Kincaid, I mean. And that's great. That's great. That's a first-round pick well spent, if that's the case. And I believe it is. So this was an extensive show. And it was because it needed to be. It was because you guys deserved it to be. We have been through a lot as Bills fans. I have, you have. Some of you that are double my age, you've been through a lot more than me. I didn't live through the 4 Super Bowls. Thank God I didn't, because at this point, I don't know if I'd be sitting here if I had. So talking about this. Maybe my hunger for it is a little bit higher than yours because you went through that and you know that might be as good as it's ever going to get. I didn't, so I don't know how good that was. Does that make sense? I think it does. But let's preview the Bills' upcoming matchup on Monday Night Football against the Denver Broncos. Now this is, as I mentioned, a team Denver, a team that's coming off of a very crucial win in their season. They played the Kansas City Chiefs. They didn't just play them, they played them very well. and they're playing inspired. And they're starting to play inspired because they really have nothing to lose at 3-5, and they have everything to gain. And many people, after they had lost, the Broncos, that is, after the Broncos had lost to the Dolphins, 70-20 or whatever it was, people were saying, well, these guys aren't going to play for Sean Payton. They're not going to do this. They're not going to do that. And as it turns out, they are doing this. They are doing that. And Sean Payton doesn't give a rat's ass what the record is. He's going to pull out all the stops against whoever they play. He'll go for it on fourth down. He'll fake punt. He'll do an onside kick in a Super Bowl. If he does an onside kick in a Super Bowl, he'll do it at any time. So this is one of those games that, yeah, it's a risky game. Every game is a risky game when you watch the Bills play the way that they have the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, even predating that to week 1. Every game is a risky, is a 50-50 at this point. There is no game that is safe. I'll be blatantly honest. None. They shouldn't look at it that way. You shouldn't look at it that way. I sure as hell am not looking at it that way. No game is safe. So I do believe the Bills will win this game, but I don't think it'll be pretty. And it'll be another game that we're going to see the offense struggle. I've come to the conclusion that we're going to see this offense struggle in most games this year. And what does that look like week to week? Well, we got to pick which matchups they'll win despite those struggles. Here we have one of them. So I think the score prediction is going to be one that is going to keep this pretty close, because as of right now, I think these teams are actually pretty even, and Denver is not a good team. So that just goes to show you where the Bills stand as of right now. And I'm going to go score prediction 28-24 with Buffalo getting the W at home. They're undefeated at home thus far. That does play a factor into the hands of the Bills, and I think that is what we're going to see. Russell Wilson's looking a lot better. Javonte Williams, really good running back. He had a very devastating knee injury last year. I'm really happy for him that he was able to bounce back from it, because I do think he's a talent. And Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, they got some good talent there. Defensively, though, Denver is not that great. The question with this one actually is, despite the offensive struggles, can our defense actually stop Denver's offense? And I think they will in moments where they need to, because guys like Terrell Bernard, guys like Dorian Williams, and the one positive kind of ties into my final thoughts. Sean McDermott has done a hell of a job with this defense. That was everybody's main concern. Not everybody's, but most members of the Mafia were concerned that, Bills Mafia, that is, were concerned that Sean McDermott was not going to be able to coach the defense and run the team at the same time. I think he's actually done a really good job despite the injuries that they've had. That's the one thing I will say, is that their defense has looked very good. I mean, we'll just look at it, right? 24 points to Cincinnati, 18 to the Bucs, 29 to New England, yes, but that was like a tit for tat game. 9 to the Giants, 25 to the Jags, 20 to Miami, 3 to Washington, 10 to the Raiders, and 22 to the Jets. That's not a bad points per game allowed, right? That's not too bad despite the injuries that they've had. So Dane Jackson played really well last week. I think Linval Joseph is really going to help Ed Oliver out a lot. And I think Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa especially could get back in the mix again. Those are two guys that were really impressive from weeks 1 to 6. Rousseau hasn't had a sack in 4 weeks, so he's due. So we'll see. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this double edition of the podcast tonight. I really wanted to provide a great episode for the Bills fans tonight, as I do every week. And this was a very important week to hop on and give the people what they want to hear. The reality of the situation in my eyes. That's the reality of it. And we'll see what happens. I appreciate the comments here. I want to go through some of these. Facebook user says, crazy Uncle Jamie moment, and I know it can never happen because it'd be 2 demotions. McDermott is defensive coordinator and Dorsey is quarterback coach. bringing in new blood. That would be crazy. Yeah, you said it. I don't see that happening. I think Sean McDermott is, for the most part, here to stay, barring anything really bad. Like if this team goes 5-12 and loses every game the rest of the year, Sean McDermott's ass is grass, regardless of the years that he has spent here and the years that he's got ahead on his contract. Terry will write that off, no problem, right? But owners do that every day. These guys got money coming out of their ears. That's not a problem. Don't see McDermott going anywhere. I think that they trust him, and I think the players do trust him. I don't know if they trust Ken Dorsey, though. I can't say that. So, and Dorsey that's another point there that Big Papa Chungus made, that Dorsey was already the quarterback coach. Bradley A. Kohler, he says, I agree 100% with what you were saying. Week 10, and we do not know what our offensive identity is. The fault is Dorsey, 100%. Trying to change that offense from 11 personnel to 12 personnel. Now, as it turns out, they know now that I believe that the 11 personnel was the way to go. And Dalton Kincaid is a better athlete in comparison to Dawson Knox. And I got nothing against Dawson Knox. I love Dawson Knox. I think that he has a place on the team, 100%. But they gave him a lot of money too. And they didn't really need to, right? It's just smart, economic cap space planning, right? And I don't think they've done that as well. I really don't. Tim Giles says, RT, go Bills. What's up, Tim? Good to see you. Big Papa Chungus says, we have no business with the record that they do after the teams that they've played. And to me, which one out of the losses that they've had, to me, is the worst? I'm going to answer that question for myself here. Out of the losses that they've had, week one, and I don't know how else to say it. Week one was fucking terrible. It was really, really bad. I've never been in a public place and stormed out after the end of a game. I walked out, literally went out to grab a coat for myself and come back in, grab my coat, come back in, and their overtime drive was already over and they were punting, and then I saw the punt return, and then I walked out. I mean, I had never been that mad. I'm talking mad, like fuming, furious mad after a loss. Not even 13 seconds. 13 seconds, I was devastated. There's a difference between devastated and fire-burning, inferno, dragon energy angry. Like I was pissed after that game. And then it kind of was like a revisited moment where the Bills played the Patriots this year and they played them like shit. That's really the best way to say that. And the Patriots are 2-7. So what are we doing, guys? What a disappointment that this season has been. And I really hope that it turns itself around, because the fans deserve this more than any other fan base that's out there. I say it every single week. I really hope it turns itself around. But I don't know if it will. I think that we're headed down a path that makes me think that post this season, we're going to be in a situation where we need to retool rather than revamp. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So I appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. It was a great show. Great to get some comments on here from everybody on the Bills Mafia Podcast Network, the Buffalo fan base. I'm Ryan Thomas, and yes, I probably would beat you in Madden. The gamer tag is actually the same as my Twitter handle, at Ryan Thomas Take. So if you guys play video games or anything like that, Madden, NHL, whatever it may be, feel free to add me on PlayStation. I'd like to play against you. I had some people add me on there the other night, and it was pretty cool. It was really cool. So I appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. Man, what a season thus far. Plenty more to come. You guys can expect this podcast every week, Wednesday nights at 8 on the Buffalo Fanbase Podcast Network, as well as any and all Thomas Take Sports Podcast platforms, whether it be viewable on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take. As well, you can listen to it on your drive into work on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much. Last and certainly not least, you got to throw it out there every time this show comes to an end. Go Bills, and let's go Buffalo. I'll be at the Sabres game Friday night. Looking forward to that one.